Yeah, here you go. Oh.
Hi Marvin, how you doing?
Not too bad, Simon. How you doing?
I'm all right. Did it say 4 a.m.? Are you somewhere abroad?
No, it's just ignore that. Ignore that.
I'm an old man. I don't get this concept. I've tried a new wireless headphones, so hopefully this sounds all right. How's it sound?
Sounds good. I'm easy either way, so it's all
Cool.
good.
Cheers. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. Is that a shot you're having? Jaeger bomb?
No, it's. Did I mention I was old? No, it's red wine. That's how old I am. But yes, cool. Right, bear with me. So, how's your day? You been doing much of the bank holiday?
So I haven't really been. No, not today. No, I've been mostly listening to a few podcasts, arranging things for an event that I got going on Sunday. I'm running like a heckler's comedy show.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I've been.
You stand up yourself?
Yeah, at the moment it's a bit of a funny situation at the moment. So I was in France, but I moved back here because of the virus.
Right.
And now I'm with the parents because I can't afford an event.
Absolutely. Did I see you were studying Gaulier, or is that where you were?
Yeah.
Or had you done that in the past? Wow. Not with the. Is the man himself still alive?
He's just about, but sometimes I do question whether when he sees performances from me and some others, if he wants to kill himself.
I've heard lots about it. I mean, it's supposed to be amazing. Did you get stripped to the bone to become funny, or was it not as hardcore as they say?
It's quite hardcore, but it could be a lot worse. I mean, it's at the point where I completed the second term and a bit of the first term, but I didn't do the third term, so I can't say fully. It's a bit like what's it called? Who you know that woman that produced that company and tried to pretend to be Steve Jobs? She was invented this this little Elizabeth Holmes or something.
Right. I don't know. No.
I can show you on this. She what was it? Stranos, and it was
Okay.
what was her name? Effectively, she created this little lizard. Yeah, Thranos. It's like this little DNA company where I don't know the full details, but it was supposed to be revolutionary, and it helped categorize people on their blood type, like cure cancer, stuff like that.
Right.
And it was a complete fraud. And she went and so she only studied. She dropped out of Stanford, and then and then she went and set up this company, and it's been now defunct, and she got caught and all that. But the point I'm getting at, in a long-winded way, is, I haven't done it fully to ascertain a conclusion in it.
Okay.
It's like in your field of being a poet, it's like someone saying they've done one poem in front of a live audience and they're now an expert in it.
Oh, is that not? Shall I go now in that case? Just sorry, I need to remember. I'm expecting a phone call. My dad's in hospital, and I'm waiting to hear from a doctor about a scan that he's had eventually. So if my phone goes, it's the only thing I need to get is talk to a doctor. Hopefully, it won't be too long. But yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. But yeah, so I might, if the phone does go, I put everything else on silent. But I need to just get contact with a doctor, basically. So I'll apologise for that.
What's been happening to him? What is your dad?
Oh, he got COVID. He's up in North London. I'm basically down in Sussex, and he lives in sort of in the family home, what's left of the family home in North London, with lots of support. And he got COVID basically 2 weeks ago, and admitted into hospital, and so he's just been. We're trying to remotely get him because we can't go visit. So I've been, just trying to get hold of doctors and stuff like that. So it's been challenging couple of weeks, but yeah, we're finally getting to a point where we're going to move him into a home down here. So, but yeah, it's been fun.
Oof, well, bloody hell, must be. This thing, it's so many stupid things have gone on. Like people saying, "Oh, it's nothing more than a cold," and now people are trying to make it a race thing as well. And then
it's really weird. It's fascinating. My dad's 83 with diabetes, so he's prime for the picking. Apart from he's white and in North London, he's not. In many ways, it's kind of he should be relatively safe, but he's old. It's crazy, isn't it? But speaking to lots of doctors, they've just got no idea. They don't have any idea how it affects and what it does, and how it resolves itself, and it takes ages. I mean, he's been getting delirious, basically. And then he gets better, and then he gets ill again, and and it's mad. And it seems to affect people differently and worse, depending on how rich you are, how white you are, and whereabouts you live. It's odd. Yeah.
No, but I don't like. I've been watching the news recently, and it feels like they've been trying to make it a race thing, which is complete. Like it's not like it's a virus of a brain. It's like saying, right, I want to kill this person, that person.
Yeah, it's just weird, isn't it? It's just statistics on it, which seems to be, it's really hard to know anything, really, because you just don't know whether it's because, you only hear all about in this country, don't you? I'm just assuming you're in England, aren't you? So, but yeah, you don't. When they were talking about sort of BAME people getting it worse, and then you're going, well, is that because they're not? Is that a money situation or a wealth situation or a housing situation, or is it just, who knows? It's just, and what's weird is, I mean, my dad's going to get moved to a nursing home, and he's going to get paid for by the health service until the whole thing's over. So they're just throwing money to get him out of hospital. So he's going to be put in a nursing home for about 3 months, which is about 20 grand's worth of financing. So it's got to be bad if the Tories are spending that much fucking money. So yeah, it's all just crazy.
Well, there's just some things I've heard is, have you seen the Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewing what's it called? Like someone that focuses on that sort of thing.
Right. No.
And he was basically saying that with this virus as a whole, it may be this case for 18 months until they find a cure for it.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Well, they just haven't got a cure, have they? So, and there's just nothing. Yeah, I have no idea how they're going to do it and what they're going to do. I mean, my dad, he got COVID positive reading end of March. No, we're in March now. It was April, so it was remote. Yeah, end of March. He went in on the Friday, got the reading on the Sunday, and then he only got his negative reading 2 days ago. But he's gone up and he's gone down. It's basically his lungs are fucked. So they're expecting him to have, they think he had the pneumonia, and then they're now looking to see if he's got a clot on his lung, and if not, it might be affecting his heart. And it's just, when you speak to them and they go, we don't know if he'll get it again, we don't know if he'll not give it to anyone else, we don't know how long it's going to take. And no one's, doesn't seem to be anyone's the same at the moment. It's just weird, really crazy. And yet you hear it on the papers, and you hear people kind of going, "Oh, I'll be all right. We're all a bit bored. It's all a bit like a bank holiday." And then you kind of sort of look at it from that perspective, and you go, "I can't go visit my dad." And if 40,000 people are going to die, that's at least 100,000 people mourning who can't go and see them. As soon as my dad went into hospital, my natural reaction was, I'm going to go to hospital, go visit him. And they're like, you can't come visit. So it's like, well, and I was, that first couple of days was genuinely, thought he was going to go. And you just thinking, I can't go. My brother lives in France, so he can't come and visit. So you can't, and you're going, can you just look after my dad whilst you're in full PPE and hold his hand? It's just, it's good for the poetry.
The pain.
Absolutely. I've had some, nice digging the depths and lots of stuff to try and be positive with it and stuff like that and look for gratefulness and stuff. But yeah, gratefulness, gratitude, whatever. Yeah, good for the poetry.
The only solace to take from this is that I think there's a lot of viruses that are more deadly and a lot worse than COVID.
Yes.
And so it could have been a lot worse if one of them sort of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now we'll be more prepared once it's all over.
Well, the more you hear about that, Guardian, you've seen there was the investigation. They role played it in 2016, didn't they? And they just sort of didn't go for recommendations, which was get the PPE, have the facilities. Jeremy Hunt was in charge at the time, and Jeremy Hunt was like, "Oh, I tried to get the money, and they didn't do it." So they knew it was going to happen. But yeah, hey, it's always good. The Tories will get away with it like a bunch of cockroaches that they are.
Oy, making it political now, we.
Sorry, I'll try and keep that one under control. Anyway, so what's this for?
Well, effectively, I'm just going to be... It's just for my podcast. So I'm going to interview lots of different people, find out what a lot of creatives are doing this time, what they plan to do once this is all over, and what got them into their industry. That's what the podcast is about. And have you seen the Terminator film?
I have seen it. Yeah, Terminator 2, absolutely.
You see that scene where Sarah Connor gives Arnold Schwarzenegger the bottle and she says, "What's your story?"
Right.
I think everyone's got a story, and it's about
finding that out. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. What's the podcast called?
Marvins World.
I'm going to write that down. I'll check it out. Sorry for not knowing it.
I haven't produced it yet. I'm still working on designs.
Oh, okay. That's all right then. I'm glad. No wonder I've not heard of it. Oh, cool. Yeah. Wow.
But you seem to have an interesting life. Like, so you're a poet. You've been doing it a lot in different pubs across sort of where you're from for 5-6 years, something like that.
I'm trying to work it out. It's probably 6 or 7 years, something like that. Yeah. So I used to, when I was younger, I used to write quite a bit, and then sort of paused for about 10 years and had kids, and had to try to create a career. So I'm a tree surgeon by trade, so that's how I sort of make money, or used to make money, and then sort of started writing again probably 7 or 8 years ago, and then it sort of I got hooked up with a bunch of musicians who do put on a regular night where I live, and then I would do the links in between, do the poems in between, and then we just it sort of spiraled from there. I sort of lucked into having a book, and then there's probably 3 or 4, probably 2 or 3 regular gigs a month in the area that sort of just not paid gigs, but just sort of going to a pub. I'm on the sort of list for doing stuff like that. And then weirdly, this was my year. I thought I was going to actually kind of crack on with doing it. Started to go into schools and try and sort of work my way into getting paid gigs for it. I've had a few people the last couple of years get me to write poems for them for money. So it felt like things were getting there this year, and then trying to crack on with the second book, which could possibly come out, but I'm not sure people want a generic book about poetry at the moment. I'm not sure if it's going to be. It doesn't feel like the time to be promoting yourself. When I look on Facebook and Twitter and all these places where people are kind of promoting their latest book coming out, it feels a bit like now's not the time for self-promotion.
It feels. I've seen a few of these adverts on Facebook, and it comes across as very sharkish, very. They have chicken shops in deprived areas, like scavengers in a way, and I don't like it. Like the one of the most stupid ones was there was an advert with an Asian-looking woman saying, "Hey guys, you want some psychology or some sort of therapy or something? This is really great. Like it does this and does that." And it was ridiculously stupid. Like, I know you want my money, and I know you think I'm stupid, but please, it was just ridiculous. And then there's all these marketing ones as well saying how to make money in the COVID-19 disaster. It's just
It feels very. It feels like the way that you do it is you survive it and you end up with goodwill. You don't sit here and go, "Oh yeah, I've written this thing. This is brilliant. I'm really poor. I need your money." Because we're all, it's not like everyone's got a sob story now, and everyone's got problems, and everyone's hunkering down. And actually, what you want to do is come out of it with a bit of dignity, and not be Tim Witherspoon, who's just sort of trying to make money out of it. And you want to be like the businesses that are giving food to people who work in the NHS, the shop restaurants that are just keeping going and just going, I'm paying the staff, I'm doing what I can, I'm getting as much money, and I'll just survive. And those are the ones where people will hopefully go back. So yeah, it feels a bit kind of, yeah, it's when I do a lot of, mainly most of my stuff now is I do a couple of Zoom gigs a month, and a couple of Discord gigs a month for poetry, but they're just to catch up with the other poets and musicians and stuff like that. But it's the ones where people are trying to shill their, sell their stuff that just feels wrong. I don't know. Mainly because who's going to spend their money on pointless frivolity when actually all you're trying to do is find fucking new roll and flour.
Yeah, it's just, what is, can I ask you a question? So
yeah,
what is so at the moment your main focus is just to do obviously it's mostly making sure that your dad's all right, everything sorts itself out, and you're just trying to do a lot of poetry gigs just to keep yourself going effectively.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love the performing bit of it. I mean, I'm a bit of a whore when it comes to that, and I love. I've always used to see myself as a performance poet, and I think I'm quite good. My background when I was being the creative as a younger person was more sort of acting, and I'm very good at putting myself out there, and I'm kind of, I may not be very good, but at least I'm available, sort of attitude. But I mean, I think I'm very good at playing a crowd, so I really like going to pubs. We do a regular pub group, regular gig in a place called Shoreham near where I live, which is a proper spit and sawdust pub that they have musicians and poets on, and you've got half the audience. All sound systems on there. I can hear myself. That's weird. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, half of the audience are there because they're performers, and the other half are drunk people in the pub. And I really like getting the drunk people on board. So I'm quite good at going for something that will get a good get the audience going. So actually, Zoom gigs are really difficult, I think, because you're only really performing to other people who are there. You very rarely get an audience. So it doesn't have as much of the fun of it. I like the adrenaline of the performing, and I like the fun of being able to start a poem by pissing off half the audience and then winning them back with a bit of emotional oomph, and realize that you're taking them on a journey. It's quite difficult to do that when everyone else is muted listening to you, waiting for me to finish so they can unmute to give you an applause, because it just feels sort of soulless. So it's quite difficult. So a lot of my stuff now, I'm doing stuff on Twitter, which is again another sort of interesting way of doing stuff. So yeah, and I know there's lots of people writing and there's lots of people talking about it, and I've gone from the start of stuff writing poems every day and trying to kind of record the moment, to actually going, what, if I can do one good poem a week or every 2 weeks, it's actually worth something, whatever worth is, then that's probably more important than I went for a walk today and found some new roll.
Well, it's funny though that you mentioned that, because I find sometimes if you're writing a joke or something, if you do go out somewhere that you've not been before, if you go for a walk or just sit in a cafe or something, you tend to get more creative.
Yes. Yeah. I think this is a hell of a creative time. I mean, this is the time for artists to record what's going on, because this is unprecedented, and it's really important that and people are turning to. Did you watch the late? What was it called? The Late Review last night, and they were doing a bit on poetry last night. And that's quite interesting, talking about poetry in lockdown. And I think this is the time when people turn to poets. You know, I wrote a poem ages ago when Jeremy Hardy died. And the way I managed my poems is if I can write something good, if you link it up to the right sort of people on Twitter, it does quite well. So I wrote a poem about Jeremy Hardy, and then I ended up writing a poem about how I wrote a poem that was really successful. And actually part of that is I've written something really emotional, but then I've also written something that's gone quite well. So it turns from kind of, reflecting society to an ego thing. And I talked about the guy at the Grenfell memorial, and there's the poet up there reading a poem at the memorial service, and part of me thinks, wow, brilliant, what an amazing way that everyone's loving hearing his poems, and then the other part of me is going, fucking hell, I bet that's good for sales.
Oh yes.
It's good publicity, it's good coverage.
Yeah, it's funny because one thing that was ridiculous during the Grenfell disaster is that people were trying to make money out of it. And like you have people that are getting these buckets saying, "Oh, I'm from this here. It's going to be used for this and that." And some of them just look very fishy, so I didn't put anything in. But it's just that's the lowest of the low. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of human nature reverts to bad sometimes, doesn't it? But, yeah, it's but I think people need it, and I think kind of poets and artists and creators and comics need to be talking about where we are now, and I think that's what people need at these times, don't they?
Yeah.
As well as obviously nurses and doctors and people in shops and stuff like that, the important bits.
But what's going to happen if they do decide to? Because I mean, the restrictions will be lifted probably within a few months or so. I mean, what's going to happen when things let rip? What's going to happen to?
Well, it's hard to know, isn't it, really? It's really, I mean, I'm quite lucky. I live in a really nice little quiet town with about 10,000 people in there. So it's not, we've been really protected and really kind of, we're all sort of living a sort of bank holiday life. I'm still out and working. I've got a different, but a career not career, but I've got stuff to keep me out and about. So I'm really lucky. But most of my neighbours are all staying at home, living like we're living on the bank holiday. But with this etheric fear of hell that hasn't really touched us because we're out in very low rates, so it's hard to know, isn't it? But yeah, I don't know. Whereabouts are you?
London, southwest.
Which bit southwest?
Wimbledon.
Okay. Well, I grew up in North London and Northwest. So yeah, my dad was whatever's left of the family home is up in Edgware, top of the Northern Line. But yeah. But I mean, that's just a completely different life that I left that a long time ago, fortunately. But yeah, I mean, we're so protected that we're not really seeing the horrors of it. We're just living the lifestyle without, seeing people dying. But yeah.
What made you decide to move over to? What made you decide to leave London as a whole?
Well, I was born there. I mean, I grew up in Brent and Kingsbury around there, and then when I sort of moved away from my folks who lived in Edgware, North London, we'd always gone down to the countryside sort of during the summer holidays and Christmas holidays. So I knew Devon really well. So the plan was to move out to the countryside. And I was just in a big house share back in the 90s, living in big house shares, and met my partner. And then we moved down to this place called Steyning, which is just north of Brighton. So it was kind of supposed to be a gateway drug into the countryside, but we sort of stayed here, and we've just done, I think we're about 18 years down here. So yeah, it was just, we found it was lovely, stayed for a bit, got a job, had children, and then you can't move once you've got kids. You're sort of stuck here because you've got friends.
that is funny, isn't it? When you have kids, they're like magnets keeping you to a place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, magnets all weight around your ankles, but I'm not sure.
Is that one of your poems?
No, I try to be positive about them in case they ever read them. I keep the dark ones, but yeah, they don't get to see those.
So, one thing I find interesting, do you use anything like the stream of consciousness or like rule of three or anything like that?
I don't know. See, I do. Because I work outside. Most of my time, I'm listening to podcasts because otherwise, the voices would take over. So I do listen to a lot of comedy podcasts. So I started out on sort of Goldsmiths and Herring, and I've been listening to Rule of Three the last couple of years, which I've discovered and stuff like that. So yeah, most of mine I'm allowed to be wanky about it all, am I? So they're either the ones I don't rhyme. I haven't got meter. I like the free formness of it. I like a kind of, occasionally I'll try and be funny. When I started off doing it more as a performance stuff. So when I stopped writing for myself and realised I needed to write for an audience, I would certainly look at, some of the sort of comedy tropes of stuff, but without having really sort of studied it. But, so most of the stuff I'll spit out quite quickly. I'll sort of, if it's something's got in my craw, and there's been a lot in the last sort of 5 years, haven't we, that's politically quite agitating, so it's been quite good, and I can spit them out, and then once I've spat them out, I'll kind of re-edit and tie them back in, and try and kind of create a sort of a bit more stuff. But yeah, I'm not very good at fitting it within a format, but I'm trying, certainly. What I've been doing the last sort of 3 or 4 months on Twitter is there's a poet on there who puts a pebble up every day. He takes a pebble, takes a photo, and about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, he'll put a pebble up, and he's called Pebble of the Day. It's called Dean Wilson. He's up in Withensea. So he puts the pebble up, and he's got Pebble of the Day number, and he's up to 293 at the moment, and I've been going for about 2 or 3 months now, and he's got like 7,000 followers. So actually what's really interesting is you've got the size of a tweet to try and successfully write a poem that people like. So every morning I'd wake up and look at that, and I'd spend sort of 5-10 minutes, and I'd religiously do it every morning. And originally I started doing it to be really poety, and you could make it really arty. And actually, if you do quite well, you've got to get past him first, so you've got to get a like, and if you're good, you get a retweet, and then you've got an audience, a pure audience of 7,000 people who are just, he follows 6,000, 7,000 follow him. There's no loyalty there, and there's no kind of commitment. So it's been really interesting to kind of go, okay, well, this morning I'm going to write one that people will like, as opposed to one that I think is really clever, or one that's really good. So you can write a poetry one, and you'll get, one, if you're lucky, a couple of retweets, and 5 or 10 likes. But you can if you do a really funny one, or an inspiring one. And inspiring ones are the really good ones to do now, because people are looking for inspiration, I suppose. But you can do a funny one now, and so it does help. I'm in sort of learning to write, not commercially in any way that, in a popular way, which is quite interesting. So yeah, there's quite a few. I've been kind of using a few where, you start off a bit grim, or, he'll do one that's a bit like an ammo, and you'll talk about, the one that went down quite well was a pull back and reveal thing of it going out and seeing the world, and then basically turning around and going, fuck this for a living, and pisses off back. And that kind of comes down quite well, because, people think it's great because you're sort of referencing stuff. But yeah, it's quite interesting.
Have you done the poetry nights in London?
No, I sort of not really. Just kind of logistics. Going there. I mean, I get, there's quite a big poetry scene in Brighton, and I know a few of the Brighton lots. I'm not particularly keen on the slam aspect of it, and that kind of, the going out sort of competition poetry. I don't think, I'm not, probably too scared of not going down well, too sensitive an ego. But yeah, as I say, this year was the year I was going to really go for it. I mean, God, my last gig, which was in this tiny little pub in Shoreham, Henry Normal came along to. I sort of befriended, me and Henry Normal became friends on Twitter. And he came along to the last gig I was at, just specifically to watch me, because we've been sort of chatting. So in theory, it was that point where you're kind of going, okay, I'm at that point now where maybe, I'm sort of growing my sort of base as a sort of, through Twitter, and growing it with the potential of getting out into the Brighton scene. He was talking about doing a Brighton festival. He's part of an arts centre. you know, so it was just getting to that point where I was kind of stepping my toes into kind of going for it a bit more seriously, trying to make money out of it. You know, ideally, I'd like to be at that point. Well, that was where I was hoping, was to be making more money. You know, the plan was at the end of last year was to get to the point where I'm earning a decent day's wage 2 or 3 times a month in poetry, as opposed to going out doing tree surgery.
Okay.
You know? And sort of, so I was getting close, and then all this malarkey kicked in, and it's like, okay, I'll just carry on.
So you wanted to build to the point where you could maybe make a living out of being a poet.
Yeah, writing more than poetry, but poetry, yeah. I mean, I'd like to, you know, the book sells not particularly well, but I don't think books sell particularly well, but it buys us coffee once or twice a year. And obviously having a new book coming out, the idea would be that having a bigger Twitter profile, you know, would have probably helped sales, and sort of getting into that sort of scene. But yeah, ideally, I'd like to find a way of earning money through writing, through, you know, specifically sort of poetry. But again, it's a bit like a, you know, have you heard of Brian Bilston? He's a
sorry.
No, well, he's known as the poet laureate of Twitter. So he's got and he's just had his first novel out, and basically he came down our way, and I was sort of chatting with him when we put on a gig down here. He came and did his book tour, and basically he got a publisher through Twitter through his poetry. But basically, the publisher sort of went, you don't make money out of poetry, write a novel. So he wrote a novel with poems in it. So, you know, there's not really money in poetry.
What's his name? Brian
Bilston.
Brian Bilston.
Bilston.
Bilston. Okay, let's have a look. Oh shit, the screen. Brian Bilston.
There you go. That's the man.
Whoa.
Where's he up to? 73,500 followers. Yeah, I mean, he's massive. So yeah, Diary of Somebody is the book he's created, which he was up for a Costa with it, first book prize. So, but yeah, I mean, he's very good. I mean, his poetry is brilliant. It's kind of like black belt poetry, basically. There's lots of kind of takes a song and he'll change the lyrics, or sort of pastiches and working within sort of, you know, breaking the form of it and stuff like that. Really clever man.
Is he French? Does he speak French?
No, he does. He's a English man. Just kind of, he hides behind a facade of kind of Brian Bilston. It's not his real name.
Ah, okay.
But yeah,
it's funny to see that little bit of French here.
Yeah, I think that's a art school reference, isn't it? There's something about that kind of, this is not a thing. But yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So how does sort of poetry so you're sort of, I would say, a creative writer in a way. That's your thing.
Yeah, you know, wanking on about myself in artistic ways, yes.
So how does the wanking about yourself in artistic ways work?
Yeah, it's really good. Good question. Yeah, I mean, I do. The stuff that go, you know, there's I suppose there's two aspects, isn't it? For me, there's the therapeutic side of it. You know, part of it, I got back into writing. When I found myself writing poetry again, sort of 8-10 years ago. One after my mum died, and then I was a funeral of a mate who killed himself, and I just found myself writing again. So actually, I started the writing again for sort of therapeutic reasons, to sort of get it out and process the stuff. And then it kind of transmits. So there's sort of, for me, there's two aspects really. There's the one which is the kind of, okay, something's wrong, let's write about that, and then we'll maybe heal that problem. And then there's the other bit, which is the writing a pebble poem. You know, I can write you something that will be really inspiring and all people will really like. And there's that real sort of that aspect of actually that I wrote one the other week. That was a mix between the both. I went, part of me, you know, part of what people want now is people want to be inspired and given hope. And I think that's part of what any form of writing can do. So actually, you know, we need to be looking for what we're thankful for. So I wrote this one, which is called Things I Promised. Things I Promise. When this is over, this I promise not to forget. So it was all about the things that I promised that I'm not going to forget. So all about, you know, shopping locally, valuing nurses, people who've actually businesses that have survived by being nice, and the people who haven't survived, who've survived by not being nice. And then eventually I got to that point where I wrote the bit about I'm not going to forget the carer who cleared up my dad's mess, and the A&E people who took my dad in, and the people who are looking after my dad. So there's a real mix within that, you know, it's a 30-line poem, and 24 of those lines are just what people like to hear. And there's buried within that are 6 lines of me just writing out about me feeling helpless and defensive and not being able to help my dad, which is what I want to do. And actually, that worked out really well. It got lots of really good feedback, and then you kind of, you know, so it's kind of actually, I think probably the way that works best is you're showing a little bit of yourself, which then other people can see. And I think that's kind of what people are looking for. So actually, I think there's a kind of an element of we look for the minutiae in life, and that will help everyone else heal themselves, or, you know,
but
maybe.
It's interesting because no, I did a lot of things you said. I know nothing about poetry, but you've enlightened me with a few things of poetry already.
No.
How? Because I've seen a few poetry mics in a few different shows, but I mean, I hear some things about there being like a BBC competition for poetry and this and that, and like how does it?
Yeah, I don't know how you're supposed to judge it, really. Apart from, I think most other people are shit and I'm really good, but I mean, I'm assuming that's just what everyone else thinks about their own poems.
Probably.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, that's what. Yeah, I mean, I'm go to quite a few of those nights, and there's lots of people there who are doing. I mean, there's so many different ways of doing it, so I don't know how you judge it. You know, I think the essence of it is you need to represent it. For me, it's non-conventional writing, isn't it? The advantage of a poem is I can put the concept of thanking everyone by just repeating the phrase "thank you" with a bit at the end, and that becomes a poem, as opposed to an essay or a song or a story, which would have to be, well, less so with songs, but there's more conventional forms of writing, isn't there? So it's just how. It's just maybe I'm just lazy. I don't have to write long form stuff. I don't have to come up with too many words. But I think it's about taking the essence of an idea and squeezing it into. Ideally, if you can squeeze it into, you know, a very small, manageable section that people can represent, then you're finding that, really, you know. But then there's other people out there who just like to make lots of really rhymey, funny poems, and people seem to like that.
Yeah, how does that work? Because I've been to a few of them. I'll be crying with some poets, and then others will be having me laugh a lot, and I'm like, how come they're not doing stand-up comedy? And it's a bit.
Yeah, well, you look at, there's lots of them who do get into it, don't they? The Brian Bilston gig I saw, which was him reading his book, was like an hour-long set where he was reading his poems, but it was very much like watching him do an hour-long sort of stand-up show, you know. Okay. And I mean, I just got tickets to go see Henry Normal gig in Brighton, who's brilliant. And I mean, obviously, you know Henry Normal, do you? Are you aware of who he is?
I don't. I'm an open book. I don't know anything.
Okay, Henry Normal. Do you know the comedy of the 90s? So Royal Family.
I guess yes.
So he's basically Baby Cow Productions with Steve. Alan Partridge, basically. So yeah, he did all the comedy. He's been around he's a poet, but he was also a producer, a writer, and a comedian. So he sort of script edited the Royal Family and he just did all of the comedy that we know. And my brain's gone dead. But yeah, I mean, basically, he's now a poet, and I was just about to go see his gig, and he was an hour-long gig, and you just got an hour and a half sort of show, and you think, actually, that's really interesting when you've got a full gig to do poetry, because you can take people from a lot of his stuff he talks about is are very funny, because obviously he's a very funny man, but then also he's talking about his life, and he's very open-hearted, and talks about he's got some autism, and he talks about that, and then you see his beauty and stuff like that. So that's really fascinating, is being able to take people on the journey, basically, you know. So I think that's quite interesting, you know, that you can do all of that, you know, a bit like going to see Stuart Lee, I imagine, you know, where you go on a full sort of journey of everything.
He is an incredible. I've seen a few interviews and I've seen a bit of a stand-up, but I've never really watched enough of him. But I will get into him. He is good, and he reminds me of a lot of American comics.
Stuart Lee.
Yeah.
Yes. If you get a chance, if we ever leave our own houses again, his latest stand-up tour is amazing. I mean, it's just, yeah, absolute. The man is, I mean, it's so hack, isn't it? On a podcast saying that Stuart Lee's a genius, but he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he does there's a 10-minute bit in his latest bit where he talks about saying the unsayable when he's talking about what's his name from Afterlife, and it's just brilliant. But it's like, again, he's kind of high-end kind of comedy theory of taking you from one place to another and dragging you back down, you know.
I've not really. I mean, his wife Bridget Christie, I hear she's quite similar to him in a way.
Yeah, I think I've saw her stand-up show because it's on Netflix. I think they're very similar styles. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, again, yeah. I mean, I suppose that's kind of very. Yeah, and obviously there's a lot more sort of a political bent, which maybe I'm biased because I like a bit of political stuff as well. But yeah, how long have you been doing comedy?
A while now. I think about 6 years. Yeah, I've been gigging up and down the country, different places, gigged here and there. But yeah, I'm probably not gonna. When this is all over, I'll probably move back to France. So.
Right.
Yeah.
What were you doing out there?
Gaulier, and I was.
So you finish off the Gaulier?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So that should take you you'll become a clown, whatever you become, once he's stripped you away and turned you into something.
Well, that's at the moment. One of the weak parts of my act has always been the material as a whole. But I mean, often when I fail at things on stage, that's why I got much bigger laughs. So that's why I did Gaulier. So
right.
That's why I want to go back there. I want to enhance that and then work on my material, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it you doing shorter sets? Have you ever done longer shows or?
Yeah, I did now a show last year
in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant!
It was all right, but I mean the bits that went well were when I was clowning, which is one of the reasons why I went to the school rather than the material itself. And it is funny with Edinburgh because they have very big standards. Like a lot of jokes that I've seen people do in London, which gets big laughs, won't work in Edinburgh. Like they're a lot more stricter, and they want a lot more.
Right.
I've seen a lot of comedians that would do really well in London do very meagre in Edinburgh. They'll do okay, but they wouldn't do anything spectacular. And there's maybe only a handful of shows that really stood out during the Fringe.
Yeah. So was that last year?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. God. Yeah. I went to Edinburgh as a tech support 30 years ago. Oh God, I'm old. And that was, yeah. God. Yeah. I mean, it must have changed so much by then, but yeah. I remember seeing Jack D. I can't remember what I went to see, but yeah. I mean, it's hard going to Edinburgh, isn't it? It's hard to. How much money did you lose?
Not enough, really, but it's
not enough to be successful. Got to lose at least 20 grand before you make money out of Edinburgh.
Oh, it's a funny thing you say that because all of the ones that got good reviews were all in one venue, and it was the Pleasance last year. and they're all
right. Oh,
like big agencies, and they're all paid shows. That was an interesting thing in a way.
yeah. Right. And were you doing the pay what you want concept?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's amazing. That's completely changed sort of what Edinburgh's turned into, hasn't it?
It's made it more interesting, but I mean, I only went for a run last year. I mean, it's funny with Edinburgh. It's people go in with hopes and dreams, and like, I don't know. So I think some people just go to Edinburgh Fringe just for the sake of going. They don't go with any specific purpose in terms of them, whether it's going to help them or not, or whether there's not clear being logic. They just do it because everyone else is doing it sometimes, I feel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it used to be I suppose, a gateway into success, didn't it?
Well, it's definitely not now because there's like so many more performers and so many more comedians with the idea
Yeah.
that it's that. But it does give you the chance to network with a lot of different people. Like there
Yeah.
was a big comedy promoter from New Zealand. He came with his kids and they asked if they could sit with me because I was sat on the edge. And I said, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And I moved in. And then he saw
Yeah.
me look at my notepad and he realized that I was a comedian.
Yeah.
And then he gave me his business card and then then when I was about to go, him and his wife paid for my coffee, which was a bit funny.
Yeah, but you didn't get the tour out to New Zealand then.
Oh no, if I go in there, I'll probably email him and he'll
Yeah,
remember me. We'll see what happens.
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think kind of, I suppose it's hard to make money out of anything creative, really, isn't it? Without, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you do it really. But
Performing arts is a lot like America in that when people are rich, they're very rich and they're treated like a king.
yes,
But if you're at the other end, you are treated like dog shit.
yes, yes, and expected to do it for very little money.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you have an interesting story though. You get Justin Moorhouse to read your poems. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. I'm gonna just maybe turn the light on. Hold it one sec.
Sure.
Is that going to be too bright?
No. It's fine.
Cool. Yeah, weirdly. So as I say, I work outside, and I've been listening to his podcast. Is random, sort of. So it's about 35 minutes, no more than 45. It's called, and it's all just. He'd been doing it on and off, and I was just, as I say, he started that one week. He just sort of went, "Oh, I'm going to start doing Poetry Corner," and he read out a poem. So I just emailed him whilst stopped working. I was cutting a hedge at the time. Stopped cutting a hedge, and I just went. I may not, as you know, I just used that line on. So with you, that I may not be any good, but at least I'm available. Here's a poem. I'll be your pod. I think I called myself Pod Laureate, which is awful, and it stuck for a while. And then, so I've just email him in. I mean, it's very random. His podcasts are sort of don't come out very often. But yeah. So I send him an email every so often, never get an answer back, and then his podcast will drop down, and if I've sent one in, he'll generally read it out. I did send one the other day, it was a bit depressing, but he didn't read that out, so I sent him a more positive one. And then I did that one, things I promised to remember, whatever, when this is over thing. I sent him that, and he sort of read that one out. So yeah, so it's kind of, yeah, it's nice. That's quite good. I mean, again, I don't write specifically for that. if I've written something, I'll send it him. You know, and again, if it's any good, I'll try not to send out dross, just because it's a bit rubbish.
You don't want to produce. You don't want to be like a YouTube vlogger where they just produce absolute shite.
Yes, just to get myself out there. I mean, I'll do that if it pays me. If I get a coffee out of it, I'll do that. But apart from that, no, absolutely. I mean, I try and write stuff that's actually, good. But that's only my judgment on that, really. I mean, it's all a bit random what people I think is good or not. Like I say, I can put a poem out on Twitter and it will be an absolute flop, and then I'll do another one that I think's a bit rubbish, and then it'll go down well. So it's very hard to judge, especially you just got to write what you want to write. It helps if you write a poem with your dad and you say, "Oh, my dad's got COVID. Here's a poem about that," because you kind of get a good sympathy vote.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know, people love it. But yeah, so that's quite interesting. That's good. I mean, that's quite a sort of interesting, sort of fun thing to do. Is every so often just sort of send him an email when he's put his next podcast up, because it's so random that you sort of forget to do it.
So how does he get a regular base if he's not doing it regularly?
Well, I think he's sort of fairly. I don't know how he did. Well, I mean, I suppose people are subscribed, aren't they? So it's just. I mean, he was fairly regularly doing it, probably once every couple of weeks. But then he's been quite regular the last couple of weeks because obviously he's got nothing else to do. So, but yeah, there's lots of podcasts that drop by the wayside, isn't there? There's always a feeling that, from an outsider's point of view, it seems to be, you know, most. Yeah, it's quite a good way in of getting into comedy by doing a podcast now, isn't it? So
you're on that podcast sort of group that I'm on. What sort of
comedy podcast devotees?
Yeah. What made you get into that? And
well, as I say, I'm sort of working outside, so I sort of otherwise I end up listening to the same 4 albums over and over again. So I sort of got into podcasts through that. I mean, I remember originally doing the Adam and Joe stuff. Listening to Adam and Joe years ago. But yeah, I mean, I suppose I started off. How did I get into? I think I randomly found Stuart Goldsmith's one, The Comedian's Comedian, because it's very good. I think actually I got into it through because I'm listening to a lot of the Richard Herring stuff. So I used to listen to the Collins and Herring podcasts, and then Richard Herring's The Rehearsal to Poe and stuff like that. And I think Stuart Goldsmith interviewed Richard Herring. So then I got into the Comedian stuff, and that was amazing. So I sort of went back to the beginning and listened to all of those. And that's good. I mean, in the early days, it was very technical how you write process, and now it's just sort of general interview stuff.
Yeah. I agree. I was watching it before, and I've been watching it, see it like 4 or 5 different podcasts, but I've gone off the Richard Herring one because I feel I don't feel I learn anything from it. So I'm a bit like, I'm gonna stop watching it now.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the difference between him and Stuart Lee, I think they're very similar because obviously they worked together, didn't they? I've seen him a few times. I mean, it's quite interesting getting them for free. I'm not, particularly got a lot of money, so I haven't ever donated. So I will, when people come down here, I'll definitely go see Richard Herring because, I like his Me 1 versus Me 2 snooker, and Rehearsal the Poe I really like. And actually, I think his live stuff's really good. And he's actually very good at spontaneously being quite funny, which I really like. So yeah, I think when he reads it, he's very similar, again, like Bridget Christie and Stuart Lee. They're very similar humour, but it feels like Stuart Lee when I've seen Stuart Lee, I can see him do the same thing 4 times, and it feels like he's doing the same thing for the first time for you. Whereas Richard Herring feels like he's reading a script. Whereas if I see him doing a Rehearsal to Poe, it's just fucking brilliant, and he will give people space. So he's very much based on who he's interviewing, I think. So if he's interviewing David Mitchell and a lot of people who are actually very funny, he'll let them have space.
Oh yes, it's not he's had some really good ones. Like David Mitchell was really good.
David Mitchell's very good.
Julian Clary, he was quite funny.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, when he gets people, I know he was doing a big thing about Brian Blessed, and I thought the Brian Blessed one was just painful because it was just Brian Blessed being an egotistical git, and I just thought there's no space for anyone else. But he's good at giving people space. I think his interview style is brilliant for that.
But I don't feel it's good entertainment, it's all right, but I don't feel it feels so. Some of them have been good, but recently I've decided that as I've got a lot of time to watch a lot of podcasts, I've decided that I'm not going to watch the podcast because it's just, I don't feel I gain that much from it. So that's
right. Yeah. And again, that's more kind of just he can delve deep into some interesting stuff. But yeah, a lot of time it can be quite frivolous and flippant. I like The Bugle and Alice Fraser's one. Do you do the Alice Fraser's The Last Post, which is a daily one? I think she's very good. Alice Fraser.
Alice Fraser.
Yeah, Fraser, I think. I'm going to just disappear off screen because the windows are open. I'm getting cold and we're getting midges in the house. So hopefully the reception will carry on.
But it's there's about 4 or 5 that I watch. So Mark Maron is pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, you're very good. Do you like listening to Americans? I'm not very good at listening to Americans.
I'm not really fussed as long as I can learn from it and it's something that's useful. Because I actually no, my 2 favorite podcasts are Hot Boxing and True Geordie. And True.
Hold it 1 sec. I've run out of reception near the window. Carry on. Sorry, Mark Maron.
And True Geordie.
I don't know then.
Well,
Okay.
True Geordie's a big Newcastle man, and he interviews lots of famous people, and he's influenced by Joe Rogan, but yeah, he's very good. Joe Rogan's a podcast. It's good. He's got the best guests, but occasionally it goes on too long. Whilst with Mike Tyson's Hot Boxing and True Geordie's podcast, they're normally about an hour or 2, which I think is good. Any more than that, then it gets a bit much. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You need, sometimes they do go on a long time. What was the one whose distraction pieces I could never get on with? I think he does some really interesting interviews, but again, it's kind of, some of them are a bit more, I don't know. It's the ones that have got, if you've got a 10-minute introduction before the actual interview starts, it feels a bit like kind of, you're not doing it for the right reasons.
That's the thing with, Mark Maron has that bit, but I just skip past to the 10-minute bit. I ignore that and then I get to the...
Just go straight to the good stuff. But Adam Buxton's good. I like his podcasts. But again, I suppose these are people comedy-wise, I sort of grew up with. So you feel a bit like kind of I've heard them for a long time. Have you ever listened to Potham? This is the one I always say. I think it's completely different, which is a sort of possibly an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of 3 dry guys talking rubbish and then doing surreal and offensive sketches. Potham, Potom, and that's, I don't normally listen to that sort of stuff, but that's just brilliant. Not one out for a very long time, but that's very funny.
Potham, the podcast Potham.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you do the horn section as well? Do you listen to that?
No, I've not heard of that one. Horn section.
No, that's Alex Horn, and that sort of music and comedy.
It's funny. What has made sort of podcasts so popular now? What? Because I remember I used to watch Jonathan Moss and some of these other things, but now I think, what's brought this big surge in podcasts? Do you think?
Well, I like it because it's sort of independent, isn't it? Really, and it's sort of, it doesn't seem to be. I know they've got adverts and stuff like that, but it doesn't seem to be that kind of. There's a freedom to do what you want to do, and I think that's kind of makes it quite interesting. It's a bit like kind of the Wild West of sort of comedy, and you can kind of have stuff that can be conventional interview format, and then you can have stuff like the Beef and Dairy Network, which is just sketch show sort of weirdness, which is a kind of surreal world. So yeah, I mean, I love it. For someone who spends 8 to 8 hours a day working outside, it's really amazing to be able to have a week's worth of stuff each week. I very rarely run out on my sort of podcast list of things to listen to. In fact, now I haven't got as much work. It's just stacking itself up, and you kind of feel you're missing out on stuff.
That's what I'm doing.
I was obsessively listening to. Who's it? I'm gonna have to refer to my tech now. Who's the one who's on every day? There's a couple of daily ones which are coming out at the start of the year, which you think, wow, it's brilliant. But now I suppose people aren't really getting enough chance. The Rob Orton Daily Podcast, who's a poet, who's quite funny. He's starting to do a lot of stand-up as well, sort of comedy and poetry. But he does one every day, and I was listening to that at the start of the year every day, and now it's really hard to kind of, if I've only got sort of less time, it's hard to kind of prioritize what you do listen to. And there is a lot, and it's really hard to kind of pick stuff up. But
it's a funny thing though. Everyone's doing a podcast now, especially in comedy. So many comedians I know are setting up a podcast, but I feel sometimes in these podcast things they're just doing it for the sake of doing it rather than there being much thought behind it.
Yeah, it feels like it's a way of getting, I think Richard Herring's obviously created a career out of it, whereas, I think he's making more money out touring the podcasts. I think you make, no such thing as a fish. Certainly when people come down this way, I saw no such thing as a fish sold out one of the biggest venues in Brighton. For not the massive, not the biggest, but pretty big one. And obviously, you can make money out of it. And I suppose it's good. It's free promotion, isn't it? From everyone else's point of view. And when those days of touring ever come back, I suppose it's a free way of getting into people and showing them that you're getting to an audience without having to promote it that much. I mean, BBC recently have been really good at cracking out podcasts. I saw that you've got Louis Theroux's new one's quite a good little podcast. Have you heard that? Grounded. Yeah, he's just done one on BBC Sounds, where it's a normal podcast called Grounded, where he's just interviewed people. So he just interviewed Boy George. He interviewed John Ronson, which is really fascinating because obviously they're quite similar career-wise, and that was quite interesting to hear them talk to each other.
Why did they get Louis Theroux to do all these weird like documentaries? Why did they pick him? What is it about his look and behaviour that makes him meet all these fucked up people?
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, I think he started off doing the Mike, what's his name, the guy out in America, the Fahrenheit 911 guy. I think he worked with him in the early days. So obviously that's how he got into making documentaries. I mean, it helps if your dad's a famous writer as well, doesn't it? That you can put yourself in.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, his dad's Paul Theroux, who's written loads of stuff. So yeah, but I mean, Louis Theroux's obviously got an interesting take on life, and he does appeal going to those people. It's more interesting, I think, when he goes to meet a bunch of fascists and queer bashers than going to meet famous celebrities. I think he's kind of gone down that way. It's interesting because they put out, I hadn't noticed he'd interviewed the Tiger King guy a couple of years ago. So that was back on iPlayer.
Oh.
Yeah, so he'd interviewed whatever his name is, the Tiger King, I think in 2016. So that was just on. I watched that before I watched Tiger King. So I kind of watched that and was a bit like, okay. And then you sort of Tiger King out and everyone was going crazy for it. And you go, I've seen that already on the telly. So you kind of knew the story.
What's the big thing about him?
Well, the Tiger King, I think people like it because he's sort of weird and eccentric, and there's that kind of crime bit. Have you watched it yet? Have you managed to resist?
10 minutes of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's that freak show telly, I think, really, isn't it? Because he looks weird, and he's got that kind of gun-toting cowboy gay thing, which obviously people think is a bit strange, which is a bit strange because he's not a normal character. And I mean, I sort of stuck with it. I watched it with my wife and she gave up quite early on. I think she managed to halfway through the first episode and then we sort of gave up, and I kind of watched a bit of it. And I stuck with it. But yeah, I mean, it's that freak show telly, I think, really. Just watching someone being really strange and then weird characters he seems to surround himself with. But, yeah. So when's your podcast coming out?
So I'm working out that I'll start uploading, editing all of this stuff from next week, and I'll start uploading it then. I'm going to get the designs, and I plan to get the designs finished by next week as well. So I'm starting them now.
So you're going to do single interviews, or what's the format?
I think the thing that's really annoying with these things is getting the right design is a pain in the neck. I've had a few silly ones, and I didn't pay them yet, but it's just that they wasted my time with a lot of rubbish. So,
right.
No, it's I've enjoyed doing them so far. Actually, I've recorded about maybe 20, I think.
Wow.
And I like it's interesting. I like listening to podcasts, and I like talking to people on them. I feel like I learn a lot from both. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying things about the books. Like a lot of the time, the things that I need to know are often on the internet. You take maybe a few days to get what you need to get to. Whilst if you go on the internet, it's already there. So why would you spend all those days reading a book to get that information?
Yeah, true. Yeah, you should chat with my 14-year-old son. I was trying to convince him to read a book only yesterday. He told me he can see it on YouTube.
It's true though. It's very.
I know. But there's something about, you know, there's something about having a book. But yeah, I know.
It adds depth. So if you're reading a topic and you want to find it interesting, you can use YouTube maybe to find a key point of it, and then you read a book to expand on it. But
Yeah,
if you want to learn something new, it's better just to go online and do it.
Yeah, I suppose so. I'd much rather people had my book in their hands that was on their bookshelf than just on their Kindle. But that's just my own egotism.
Yes, well, let's see what happens. I mean, books are still being sold, but you order. Have you got it in audio? What's it called? Audio Bible?
What my I think you can get it as a Kindle, and that's about it. Really, I've never got around to recording it. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The world, yeah, it's so different now, and it's going to be so different. Well, on Sunday, once we're told how we're going to be released by Boris Johnson, everything will be so different by Monday, won't it? But I think future-wise, it would be really interesting to see where we end up and how we end up. Really, I mean, that's what's fascinating, isn't it? That we're living in history at the moment, and you know, it's going to be so redefined. You know, I think, or maybe we'll just revert back to bland.
What are your plans for yourself once things are better? What are you planning to?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I need to think about what I'm going to do about the next book, which would be quite interesting, because whether I just carry on, I've got the books there. It's just I haven't had time to finish the sort of the final read through and check the punctuation. I've been arguing with my my publisher about punctuation, whether poetry needs punctuation or not. So we're at an impasse where he's put some punctuation in. I need to take it out, but I just kind of don't know if people yeah, it seems really odd to suddenly publish a book that's got poems about Brexit and stuff that will have a completely redefined world. So maybe, you know, we'll see. But yeah, I'd like to get the book out. I'd like to get back into schools and be going out teaching and doing workshops and stuff like that. You know, I mean, I'm getting on now, so I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be able to carry on working outside and have a physical job. So that would be nice. There's we're looking at trying to set up an art centre in the community where I'm at, and I'd like to be sort of running that and managing that as well, and just trying to kind of organise gigs down here. You know, so that's quite interesting. But yeah, you just don't know how long that's going to be, really. I mean, you're probably not. Then mass gatherings aren't going to be around for probably another 3 or 4 months, are they? So
no.
So what happens to you? I mean, assuming you how do you? Oh, so you're going back to France. At least you've got you put off the career for a bit longer, as in because you're carrying on. But yeah, it'd be interesting.
Not in a way. In a way, it's actually been good for me for this. I thought of because I got more time. There's a lot of things that I wanted to do whilst I was at Goli and doing different things that I couldn't do. Now I've got a lot of time to think of different things and lots of other things because I have been quite busy during the whole Corona thing.
Right.
So I've been learning French, and ironically, my French is better now than it was when I was in France because everyone in there speaks English. And there's a whole list of things. So it's giving me lots of. It's strange for me in a way. It's giving me lots of things to do. So
yeah, France is unlocking, isn't it? My brother lives out there, so I was speaking to him today, and he's saying that they're about to release it a bit. He's in Brittany, so he's saying that his bit of France is quite not got it too bad, so they're being released a bit quicker than everyone else. That'd be interesting. I'm assuming you were in Paris, were you?
No, I was in Étampes, which was on the outskirts of France, well, near Paris, but not in it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see. Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting time. I think people are having to evolve and move and change quite rapidly, and I think kind of people are looking, I don't know, I think maybe people who weren't particularly keen on the system that we had, and actually the thought of having to go back when people are, certainly over here where people are being paid, my neighbours who getting paid to stay at home and spend time, you know, sort of really appreciating that. So it'd be interesting, be a really interesting time. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you said you're building an art centre. That sounds exciting.
I'd like to. We've been looking for funding to get it sort of up and running. We have a festival. This place is called Steyning, where I live, and we have an arts festival once every 2 years that's been going for about sort of 8-10 years now. And we have lots of pubs, and we have a sort of a centre, which is where the parish council is, and with a theatre space, but it's rubbish. We don't have any performing. So we've got pubs where you can do sort of gigs. I do a bit of music with mates, and you can play to 20 people or you can play to 50 people, but there isn't a specific venue that's any good for 200 people, really. So when we had Brian Bilston came down, it was the first time we'd been down to Sussex way. So we sold 50 tickets for this gig in this beautiful little sort of studio, and we probably could have sold 250. But obviously we didn't have anywhere. So when we have a festival every 2 years, they get a massive marquee in, and they fill it up for 2 weeks, or normally a month actually. I think they've gone down to 5 days, something like that. But yeah, the idea would be that we need a venue that can sustain, you know, with an art centre and a gallery and a cafe and recording studios for the kids and stuff like that. So that was the plan, and we're quite lucky. We've got a few people with money around that might fund it, and looking at getting some art centre funding. But so the plan was, I started thinking about it 4 or 5 years ago, and then we were forced to move out of the house we were in, so I had to move and I put it on hold. And then this year was again the year I thought, oh, we'll get that done, and then this has kicked in, so we've cancelled the festival this year. So I kind of think, you know, I'm not sure there's going to be a spare 2 million to set up an art centre when people are just trying to sort of breathe and eat. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, that would be really nice. I'd like to get into that because, again, it's nice to be able to put on gigs and have a bit of control over those gigs and be able to. I think if you run the art centre and you manage the art centre, they can't stop you performing at that point. So, you know, I'll have a pending audience.
So do you run it yourself with a group of?
What, the centre?
No, the festival as a whole.
I kind of do as I always do, which is run around and be an ego and shout about it and get lots of publicity. So I don't do any of the admin. We do 1 day festival there where we get loads of musicians together and put on a beer and wine festival, and get everyone together and put on a free gig for a day. And then so I do that, and then I'll sort of take part in a few of the poetry events. So I was a part of it originally when it got set up, and then I sort of just doing my own stuff. But I've done a couple of 2 or 4 years ago. I did an interview for them. We have a brilliant bookshop that gets sort of lots of really good people down. So I managed to interview Sarah Pascoe, which is really good. So yeah, I kind of just do a few little events that I can take part in. I haven't really got time sort of to do stuff like that, but you know, chuck my ego around and people think I'm involved, and then when you go around going, we need an art centre, they think you've actually got power and influence. Because really, I'm just a raving egotist.
I'll show you something.
And then
I'll share my screen, and I think I'm going to head off. I'm going to get some dinner.
Okay.
But let me show you.
Angel Comedy was created in 2010 in this room above a pub in London. It was created because we love comedy and we wanted to create a lovely gig, because there are so many terrible gigs out there. You know, we've all been to them where there's like 3 people in the audience and there's a TV on in the corner. We wanted to create not that. So we created not that. We created this. Hello,
So where's
audience.
this?
Angel Comedy was created
Angel,
to be a lovely,
London.
friendly,
Oh, Angel of Islington. Yeah.
and I think that's what it is, right? Yes. And crucially, and most importantly, it is and always will be free. Goodbye, everyone. Started off as just one night, and then more and more people showed up. Basically, now it's like 7 nights a week, and it hosts everyone. People doing their first gig to literally some of the biggest acts in the UK. It's a huge success. We're comedians. We're not used to success.
So it is.
Oh, Barry, I was just thinking, why doesn't Angel Comedy get its own venue?
Yes, that's a great idea. In fact, to be honest, I was just actually. Thank you.
All right, great.
Thank you. I think we are almost there. Almost there, right? Permanent home, Angel Comedy can have a future and can dare to dream. A teaching training workshop room. A free-to-use podcast studio.
Working with local schools.
A venue for community projects. Right, guys?
Barry, it's good to dream, but we need chairs, lights,
Sound.
a stage, working aircon.
The roof needs fixing.
Whatever this.
So so you could do a Kickstarter campaign or something.
Yeah, there's lots of there's so many ideas around, but it's it's working within a new way. I think kind of kickstartings as well as sort of arts funding. Yeah, kickstarting would be interesting. We do have Julia Donaldson living in the town as well, which might be quite handy. But I don't think she's just bought our local post office, so kept that going. So I don't think she's got money spare for setting up an arts centre. But yeah, so yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, no, it's fascinating. Were you involved in that at all?
Not really. I mean, I gave a couple of quid here and there, if you call that involvement. But that's about it.
You're an executive producer. Yeah, I know, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it's just sort of, for me, as I'm getting on, it's kind of about just trying to find a way to make money that doesn't involve putting myself in stupid risks and hurting my back, which is generally what tree surgery does. So it's just trying to find ways to, and being creative. I think that's, and keeping the soul alive. I suppose that's quite a good thing to do, isn't it? Really, expressing oneself. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we've reached
We reached an end point. Excellent. Oh well, cheers, man. Thanks for the interview. I found it really interesting.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. It's been
an
interesting chat, and I've learned a lot about poetry that I didn't know about, and it's interesting to hear that you're working on these projects.
Absolutely. Well, I'll keep an eye out for you. Let us know when it's all the stuff's coming out anyway, and I'll sort of download it. And as I say, I've got at least 1.6 people who actually listen to me on Twitter, and I'm sure I can share it as well.
Yeah, every little helps.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. All right, well, good luck with the editing of it and everything, and I look forward to seeing it, man.
And best of luck with your dad. Hope he gets better.
Yeah, cheers, man. Thanks a lot, and good luck with Goliath. Cool.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, good night. It's the awkward bit where we leave now, isn't it?
Yeah.